Hello, hello. It is Wednesday, December 16th, and we are here for another Lunch and Learn. That is Blue drinking. You had to do that right now, Blue? So today we are talking about mental health first aid and why that's important. Here's some statistics to kind of chew on for a minute. Don't forget to go and grab the notes from the my website so you can follow along. Good morning, Chris. There's notes on my website if you want to go and grab them. So some of the statistics that we need to look at. So almost half of adults are going to experience mental health illness at some point in their life. Half. And you know what? These statistics are from 2019, so that's probably increased by now with COVID and just all of the extra stuff that COVID is promoting in folks. The isolation is a slow killer for us. 5%, good morning. 5% of adults experience a mental illness in any 1 year. That is equivalent to 43 million people. That's a lot of folks. And that's a lot of folks that probably aren't aware or are not sharing that they have mental health issues. Adults in the United States, 14% have one disorder, 5% have two disorders, and 6% have three or more disorders. Some mental health issues, they skip along hand in hand, like depression and anxiety, bipolar and depression, schizophrenia and depression. And almost always those will include a component of substance abuse because that's just one of the risk factors of having mental health issues. Most folks that have mental health issues have it developed by the age of 14. You know, I have chronic anxiety, and looking back at my childhood, I can see that now. I can definitely see that. Perfectionism was definitely prevalent. Just the negative self-talk that I had was there. Absolutely. So that's something to chew on. And then most folks have something onset by the age of 24. So out of that 43 million, most folks know by age 24 that they've got something going on that is impeding day-to-day life and the quality of life. Hello. Women are nearly twice as likely to develop anxiety as men. And I don't know if it's that they're more likely, but I think they're more likely to talk about it. Thank you. Good morning. They're more likely to talk about it, whereas men tend to stifle it and kind of push it down. Members of the LGBTQ community are 3 times more likely to experience mental health issues. That's a huge amount because there are other lifestyle and not lifestyle, but there are other components that go in hand with someone that is, good morning, that identifies as LGBT. And I've worked within that community, and again, they have multiple disorders at the same time. A lot of trauma, anxiety, and depression. So there's some staggering statistics. Here's a little bit more. So in a given year, 1 in 5 adults experiences a mental health issue, anxiety, depression, insomnia. Insomnia is a huge one. And I don't think a lot of people make the connection that if I have insomnia, I also have this mental health issue. But mental health, good morning. Mental health is definitely one of those things that has got a lot of quiet components to it, and insomnia is one of them. Insomnia is one of the very first things that you're going to encounter if you have mental health issues. Not always, but insomnia is one of those, and because things begin to happen in our gut, serotonin is impacted, and now we have a sleep issue. Kids, 1 in 5 kids between 13 and 18 are diagnosed with a severe mental health issue. And kids 8 to 15 live with a severe mental health issue. Again, these are statistics that are impeding people's quality of life. You know, kids don't express the way that adults do what is going on inside. They just typically act bad. When I was working with parents and their kids, that was terminology that we really worked on not having, good or bad. That's very black and white thinking. Good and bad. There's no such thing as a good kid or a bad kid. You've got kids that are doing positive, and there's kids that are struggling maybe with negative behaviors. No good and bad. At some point in everybody's life, they're going to experience a mental health issue. It might not be that they actually have the diagnosis, but they're going to experience a mental health issue. And I thought this was a really one of those statistics to make you go, is that you are more likely to experience mental illness than you are a heart disease or diabetes, or any kind of cancer. Now, mind you, that having a mental health issue can, in the long run, suppress your immune system, which will be the after effect of having diabetes or having cancer. So mental health definitely is connected either way, whether you're diagnosed with those things and then you develop them, or you diagnosed with mental health issues and then you develop those physical things. So those are statistics that just kind of for you to chew on. It's super important to understand the interconnectedness of healthy mind, body, and spirit, because the whole concept of first aid is that you are doing a triage. So I want you to think about when you go to the doctor, when you go to the ER, the very first thing they do is they take you and they ask you a set of questions to figure out what's going on, what's the level of what's going on, what are the aches and pains, what have you done for it, those kind of questions. So there's a triage. So understanding that, if I am consistently having a stomach ache, what is that connected to? And if I'm having frequent headaches all the time, what is that connected to? If I can't sleep, why is that? Our mental, spiritual, and our bodies are very, very interconnected. And when there's a struggle with one, it's going to be a domino effect and bleed into those other areas. And it's very important to keep that in mind and remember that if I continue to have these ongoing headaches, I need to stop and figure out what is going on that I continue to have these headaches all the time. It's very, very important to understand that interconnectedness. Good morning. So, early signs to really look for. And I want to preface this with a disclaimer, because I think it's important to remember that this information is for educational purposes only. If you're struggling, this information is no way meant to serve as therapy or professional services. If you're struggling, there's actually some resources at the bottom of the discussion notes that I provided. I'm always open if you want to message me, and I can also give you some additional resources, but this in no way is going to this is not in lieu of therapy. You got to go to therapy and do the work. So, the legal disclaimer's out of the way. All right, so early signs that you, or maybe somebody that you love or somebody that you know, is struggling. Now, mental health first aid is actually a course that you can go and take. And so the information I'm providing is very minimal in comparison to what you would get at that workshop. Similar to CPR, that is usually like a 4 to an 8 hour training. Mental health first aid is also very similar, is that you have to be able to recognize certain things and be able to learn how to approach those things and learn the verbiage to have those conversations with someone so that they are open to being able to utilize you for support. So, early signs, easily angered or irritated. Can you relate to that? Have you ever worked with somebody that it just seemed like they were pissed off all the time? Or the littlest thing, the stapler got put in the wrong place, or even at home as a kid, the towels didn't get folded right, or the dishes didn't get put up right, or whatever. Somebody that's easily angered or irritated. And again, another preface to this is that we're looking for patterns of behavior. It's not like one time somebody lost their cool and lost their temper with me and now they got to have a mental health issue. That's not the deal. We're looking for patterns of behavior because everybody's entitled to lose their shit sometimes. Everybody's entitled to get pissed off or angry. I make the comparison of that life is like a big pot of boiling water. And, right now we are on high heat. Life has turned that heat on and flames are coming up over the bottom of our pot and we have a lid on top. And when we don't intentionally take the lid off and allow the steam to escape, just like if you boil pasta or you boil water for anything and you leave that lid on, it's going to boil over. It's the same concept. So everybody has a boiling over moment at some time. But what we're looking for is patterns. We want to see if they're doing this on a continuous basis. Is there a pattern of doing it for a period of time? And then there's a stopping, and then there's a going back, and so there's this cycle. That's what you want to look for, are these patterns. So, easily angered or irritated. You know what, folks, and this might not apply as much now because we're all isolated. Who's struggling with being isolated right now? I am super struggling with being isolated. And I'm very comfortable with being alone. I enjoy being alone. But this is beginning to wear down on folks. But even more so, I did a consultation last night for a new client, and it was for a teenage girl, and Dad said that she's even more isolated than she was before. And so we began talking about that. So even now with us being isolated, like, does that mean that folks are going into their bedroom and shutting the door? Does that mean you don't hear from people that you love or care about for days on end? Are you shutting yourself off for days at a time? Are you not responding to text messages or people reaching out? Not doing things that you know you need to do in your life, like grocery shop and clean your home, take baths, that kind of thing. When you really begin to isolate like that, you really want to look at that. And again, it's a pattern. It's not like, I'm just kind of in a slump, and so for a couple of days I really just kind of Netflixed and chilled and kind of sort of answered my text messages. But in a couple of days, I was back bouncing up and I was good and I was fine. I was interacting in my regular life. Again, it's a pattern. That's what you want to look for, is a pattern. And some of these things will all be present and all be very obvious and seen. Hello, hello. So, unexplained physical issues, these are called somatic issues. So headache, muscle ache, stomach ache, sometimes blurred vision. A lot of times it's going to be issues with aches and pains that are unexplained. You haven't exerted yourself to pull muscles. You haven't eaten anything weird. Especially now with us being more at home, we're not as in much contact with folks that might have like stomach bugs or that kind of thing. So like if you're constantly nauseated, or you are constantly have stomach pains, or you're eating and then you can't keep it down, or you're eating and you have really bad gas, or there's just so many different somatic symptoms that can present when somebody is struggling with mental health issues. So again, looking for a pattern. If someone is constantly saying that they have a headache, maybe that's time to really like sit down and say, hey, I've noticed for the last 6 months that you've talked about having a headache all the time. What's going on? And being able to talk about that with someone. And we'll go into that dialogue in just a little bit. But somatic issues that are present, and again, that it's a pattern of behaviors that you're noticing. Headaches are super, super common. But blurred vision, Stomach issues are another one, super common. Impulsive behaviors. This is a big one, because even as someone is learning and developing and growing, now keep in mind that the adult brain does not completely finish developing until about age 25. The frontal cortex, where we do all of our critical thinking and problem solving, does not fully develop until we're 25. So we expect our kids and we expect our teens and we expect our young adults to do some things that are impulsive. That's part of the learning process. But again, you want to look for a pattern of behavior. Kids that struggle with being able to sit still in class, and this has been ongoing for months. Young adults that maybe are in school or they're at work and they're constantly late to work. Any kind of impulsive things, online shopping, sex, that's very prevalent, is that impulsivity for that connection, and it feels good, so boom, we just do it. And again, those are some of the things we do as learning experiences. But if there's patterns of behavior, if you see your best friend and she's gone out 6 times this week and she's told you 4 different times that she's met a guy and she's had sex, we need to address that. Same with eating. Someone says that they are, or maybe you would notice them that they're eating and impulsive, like being able to eat chocolate or sweets or alcohol. That impulsivity are things that you want to look at in combination with other behaviors that might be presenting to themselves. Mood swings and shifts. How many of you have been around somebody that their mood literally went from like 0 to 10 and you're like, what happened? That is incredibly common, are those mood swings. And that's because when you have emotions that you don't know what to deal with, and I always use the analogy of having a dirty clothes basket, and when you continue to push the dirty clothes into the dirty clothes basket, eventually you run out of room, right? It's the same concept with your emotions, is that if you push them down and push them down and push them down, that there's going to be some kind of a side effect. So you have those mood swings that are very, very evident, and sometimes they can be extremely violent mood swings. And that's very common, especially with people with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, any kind of personality disorders. They're going to have that extreme mood swing that we're like, okay, what did I just do? What just happened? What is this? And it's very much impacting. And that's why a lot of times people with those diagnoses struggle to maintain friendships or long-lasting relationships, because they have those real evident mood swings that are very tough to deal with. It's very hot and cold. So folks struggle with having those kind of relationships. Change in appetite. So that could be from somebody that stops eating completely to someone that just won't stop eating, and they usually blow up with their weight or they lose a tremendous amount of weight. It can go either way. There is no set template of what that looks like. So folks that either try to do the emotional eating and eat away what their emotions are, or people that are just like, I don't have the appetite, it's really the body beginning to shut down. Remember that interconnectedness. And so when you're struggling mentally, and the human being, the human spirit, we have to have hope. So if we're feeling hopeless, we begin this very slow shutdown of our body and of our minds. And it is like the beginning of death. It's a slow death. And if it's not addressed and someone doesn't feel supported and listened to and loved, then that is a very slow death that starts in the mind and it trickles down into the body. So change in appetite. Confused thinking, where someone is struggling on a very base cognitive level to perform, I don't want to say simple tasks, but tasks that they have performed before. So maybe like driving or cooking, or the brain fog is very, very common when you are struggling with mental health issues. And again, that's probably because you're in a state of anxiety. Your breathing has probably changed. You're probably not getting enough oxygen to your brain, or your body has begun to divert oxygen from your brain to your limbs because your amygdala is like, okay, alert, 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 we're in a dangerous space. And so those moments of brain fog, and again, it's a pattern. Of course, we all at some point are like, okay, what was I doing? How do I do that? But when you see someone that's struggling and that happens to them a lot, there's something else going on, whatever that something else is. And again, sitting down and saying, hey, I've noticed you, like, seems like you're really struggling with like forgetting, and that simple tasks seem to really be a struggle for you. Let's talk about it. That's the first step, is being able to talk about it. Excessive worrying about everything. That's usually general anxiety disorder, and worrying about everything, worrying about what people say, what people think. Can I do this job right? Am I going to mess this up? Are people going to like me? Why this? Generalized anxiety disorder is about everything. But if you see someone with excessive worry, and that can really be obvious in teens and young adults, again, they are learning, their brain is still forming, and those are those cognitive distortions that we talked about before, that excessive worry, but just worry about everything. And it could seem a little trivial to someone else, but it's important to not trivialize it, because those worries are very real to that person. Decreased energy. And I think, again, we all can relate to that right now. There's just days where I don't feel like doing nothing. Point blank. Do I still get up and function? I do my best, but it's not a pattern for me. If you see that as a pattern in somebody, your mom, your dad, siblings, a best friend, even a coworker that is struggling at sleeping at work, or during school. And a lot of this doesn't apply right now because we are so isolated and we're not in those very traditional settings. But you can still get the feel if someone says, I'm always tired, I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm tired. That's something to put your antennas up and start thinking about what's going on that you're so tired all the time. And again, that's something we all struggle with from time to time, but it shouldn't be that all the time I'm tired and I haven't figured out why I'm always tired. And then irrational fears. And again, these are going to seem really silly or stupid or trivial, but please do not trivialize them or make fun of them with that person, because it's an irrational fear and it's something in their mind is very logical. But, there's people that are afraid of, I've heard it all, afraid of, the commons are, bugs and dogs, afraid of flying, fear of failing. There's all kinds of them. But there's people that have like fear of fingernail polish, or fear of hair, fear of the sun. I've met somebody that was afraid of the sun, going outside into the sun. So there are going to be folks that have those, what appear to be irrational fears. But again, let's figure out what's going on that they're having that fear. If you notice that that's something that's ongoing and it's a pattern, make sure you are kind of having those discussions or opening up that discussion. So those were all early signs of things you can look for. Some more obvious things that are just glaring is going to be emotional outbursts. And again, this can be with a child that's 6 years old, or this can be with somebody that's 40 years old, where they just have these emotional outbursts because they're struggling to maintain their own emotional reactivity, struggling with, like, what do I do with all these emotions? So there's those emotional outbursts, and they're very frequent, and they just seem to come out of nowhere. That's a very obvious sign that someone is struggling with some kind of mental health issues. hallucinations and the delusions, so hallucinations are going to be things that you think you see or hear. Delusions are thoughts that are irrational that you don't believe. So, like hallucination. I'm just always creating my own words. Hallucination is going to be, I see those little green men over there that came from Mars. A delusion would be that, I'm going to run for the president of the United States next year, and I know I'm going to win. Something similar to that. But again, somebody that is having those frequently and they sound absurd and there's no way to fact check them. And that's not to say that people don't see things. I believe in the supernatural, but that's a totally different subject. If somebody is constantly saying that they feel like they've got bugs under their skin, that's something we need to address and talk about. Substance abuse, I kind of mentioned that earlier. Depression, anxiety, those are going to be things that are definitely more likely for folks to use substances or have addiction. It doesn't even have to be substances anymore, because you can have porn addiction, gambling addiction, sex addiction, food addiction. So it's someone that's going to have the more of an opportunity or more of a desire to utilize those things to come out of that space of where they're feeling negative or bad, and that behavior makes them feel good for a time period, and that's where that cycle begins. So you're going to see addiction a lot of time with mental health stuff. Antisocial behaviors. People just doing stuff that is like not a societal norm. Like if somebody picked their booger and just wiped it on the seat or something, that would be antisocial. And you're like, what are they doing? Those kind of behaviors, and again, a pattern of those. So, if you're around somebody that's doing things that is very not socially acceptable or, like a social norm, and we have to give it some latitude because you've got different cultural beliefs and that kind of thing. But there's some things that, like if somebody just took their pants down and took a big crap in the park, that would be antisocial for sure. So looking for those kind of behaviors, that's extreme. I know. Cycling highs and lows, that is a big red flag. If someone is cycling, I call it hot and cold. My mom is bipolar. Those are things that I experienced when I was young, is that hot and cold. And, someone that can be very close to you, and then someone that's very, what appears to be standoffish. And it's not that they're doing it intentionally. That's what that disease dictates, is that hot and cold. And then, of course, the extreme of suicidal or homicidal thoughts. If someone ever expresses to you that they want to hurt themselves or they want to hurt someone else, that is a big, huge, red, flaring, glaring, loud siren that they need some support and an immediate intervention. Absolutely. So those are kind of the early and the obvious signs of mental health. So Bailey Tan says, in a nutshell, what my grandmother is going through for the past 6 months. She is fixated on it being from a physical illness. It makes talking about it difficult. So is that in relationship to COVID and getting sick, Bailey? Is that what I'm understanding? So we'll wait for Bailey to, okay, not limited to COVID. So you're saying overall she's fixated on getting sick on a physical level. Sure has been, sure it is cancer, brain tumors. Okay, so if I'm understanding you, it sounds like maybe she has some symptoms. she's saying immediately that she's got cancer or she's got a brain tumor or something like that. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Is because she's experiencing certain things or she's noticed certain things about herself that she has those particular diagnoses or those illnesses? Absolutely, absolutely. And there are people that have those fears and those over excessive fears to being sick, and that's definitely a sign of there's some mental illness going on. And I would guess maybe like some generalized anxiety stuff going on. I know there are particular, and I don't know all of them, but there are particular diagnoses that are specific to certain worries. And I know that there's one regarding being sick or ill. You know, first of all, she's your grandmother, so I'm assuming she's probably over 65 or 70. You know, is she responsive to having conversations with her about the rationale of what she feels is happening? That's something to take into consideration. And is she open to getting some support? That's definitely a thing to consider. You know, is being able to, are you able to have those conversations with her? Does she acknowledge that they might be a little on the extreme side? And is she open to support? That would be someone that definitely would be a good candidate for getting some support. But if she's totally not trying to hear the conversation about that she doesn't have cancer or a brain tumor and she's convinced and that's how she lives her life and she's very fearful, she's definitely in those delusions. And that's going to be a tough one, especially if she's not willing to talk about it or doesn't have the clarity of mind to talk about it. I'm sorry to hear that. That sucks. You know, so that kind of takes us as to what can we do when we have someone that we love or care about or that is in our circle that is exhibiting some of those, you know, early signs or maybe even some of those very obvious signs that something is going on. Open the table for talk. And it doesn't have to be, and I would encourage it to not be, you know, I've seen you acting kind of weird, what's going on? That would be probably one that would feel very like an attack or uncomfortable, but instead kind of reframing it and being able to say something to the effect of, you know, I've noticed that you haven't, I don't know, let's create a scenario. So we've got someone that normally is very prompt to work and very attentive to detail and takes pride in what they're doing. So then that conversation could look like, you know, I noticed that you really have been kind of late to work the last 6 weeks all the time. Is there something that we can talk about, or do you want to talk about? Can I support you? What's going on in your world? And asking those very open-ended questions that can allow that person to expand upon what's going on and not just say yes or no, because then yes or no, we have to continue to dig and pry, and that can feel intrusive as well. So asking open-ended questions is a good way to start that conversation and put things on the table. As they're talking to you, make sure you're not placing any judgment. And that's hard to do. As a therapist, I have to admit that sometimes I hear things and I have had to practice with a poker face because I'm like, oh my God. But I can't display that as a judgment. So we have to be really careful that when we are talking with someone that is in that space, that it appears that they're struggling, that we're not placing judgment on what their experience is or what they're feeling or what's going on, because that's going to be an instant, they're going to shut the door and not feel safe and not want to talk anymore. So no judgments. So opening the door for conversation, no judging, and you want to validate their feelings. you know what, I can't imagine what you're experiencing. That probably really it sucks to have that fear all the time. I'm sorry that you have that. Have you talked to anyone about that? Being able to validate what their experience is, what they're feeling, is going to be, they're going to be feel like that they have created an ally. And just because you're validating their feelings does not mean that you agree with everything that they're saying or that you are condoning what they're saying. It just means that you're validating their emotions so that they feel heard. Everybody wants to feel heard. So making sure that you are validating emotions is important. Active listening. Active listening is a huge one, so if someone makes a statement to you, being able to paraphrase it back to them. So, okay, this is what I'm hearing that you said. I want to make sure that I heard this right. Not interrupting them, not over talking them. Those are all really great active listening skills to practice when you sit down at the table with someone to have a conversation about what their mental health situation is, or behaviors you've noticed, or things that you've noticed going on with them, is to be able to actively listen. And you're listening to take in information. You're not listening to give out information. Super important. Offer support and not solutions. A lot of times when folks are struggling, they don't want someone to come along and solve their issue. They just want someone to listen and to be a support and just be there. So don't go in to be the fixer or the savior. Just be someone that is going to support and listen. You do not have to fix their issues, because at the end of the day, you're only in control of one person. And that's you. Even if that person is struggling, you don't have the ability to control what their situation is. You can only control you. So go into it with the mindset of, I'm here to support and not solve. Super, super important. And if somebody, if an adult particularly, not if a kid or someone under 18, but if a young adult or an adult talks to you about suicide ideation, start asking some questions. Well, what's going on that you feel that way? Have you developed a plan? With that plan, do you have what you need to carry out the plan? And if they begin to tell you, I'm going to do this, and these are the things that I have to do it, then that's definitely a time to perk up and be concerned. And if they're talking homicidal, like they want to go out and kill somebody, then you have to really kind of think about it. Do I need to alert authorities? Do I need to maybe alert their parents or someone in their circle? Or if you are the circle, you have to make that decision of, am I going to reach out to someone so that whatever is going on in their brain, suicidal or homicidal, is not carried out to where they hurt themselves or hurt someone else. There's Lola. She said, hello, world. So that's really important. Excuse you. Thank you. Is to be able to talk through that safety plan. And part of that safety plan is like writing things down and having them write it down and put it somewhere where they can visually see it. So if I begin to feel this way, this is what I'm going to do. Because when people are in that kind of crisis, that kind of emotional overload, they don't have the ability to think clearly. So kind of having a roadmap or a template or like a crisis intervention available to where you can post it and you have talked through with that person. Because if someone says that they feel suicidal, and again, they're adults, if it's a kid or a young person, that's another whole set of responsibilities that you have. But if you are talking with an adult who says they're suicidal, then, and otherwise they are what's considered to be rational and sane, then there's really nothing that you can do. There's no committing them. There's no calling the police. There's none of that. If that person's not willing to go in to see a professional, then be their support. You're not responsible for them. And that's an important thing to remember, is you are not responsible for their mental well-being. You're there as a support and as a resource. But you can talk through alternatives to suicide. And that would be, who can they call? What can they do? What are some coping mechanisms that they've learned? What are some strategies that they can put in place? And those are the things you want to talk through with them. I really want to reiterate that you are not responsible for that person's well-being or them being alive or not being alive. And that's super important to remember, because the last thing we need to do is take on the guilt and the responsibility for the actions of what somebody else does to themselves. Make sure you remember that. Some things to avoid saying: just pray about it. I've heard that said before. And I am not attacking anyone's spiritual belief system or their faith. And prayer absolutely is a wonderful thing. Prayer, meditation. But praying or meditating is not going to solve the issue. Meditation can help with anxiety. Prayer can help with your feelings of feeling belonging and having hope. But you still have got to dig down and figure out what is the issue. Those are coping mechanisms, but they're not going to solve the issue. So don't just say to someone, just pray and it'll get better, because that's not a viable option. Again, I'm not knocking anyone's religious beliefs or their faith. And prayer is beautiful. Prayer is wonderful. But that's not the sole answer, is to pray. You just need to change your attitude. You just need to be positive. Stop being a Debbie Downer. I've heard that said as well. And that's another statement that can be super harmful to that person. It totally does not validate what they're experiencing or what they're feeling. Stop harping on the negative. Just start living. That's another, very similar. We can't do that. We've got to be able to understand that folks who are in that state, whether it's beginning stages or they're well into it, don't have clarity. And when you don't have the clarity to be able to think through and process what am I experiencing, it's hard to be positive. Hello. Everyone feels that way sometimes. And granted, we all at some point feel sad or feel depressed or feel in a slump. But we no way want to always say, we all feel that way. Because that really invalidates what that person is feeling and experiencing. You know what? My uncle, he's depressed and he worked through it. We don't want to make a comparison of what somebody we know versus this person having the same experience, because we don't. We do not have those same experiences. So don't make that comparison. And then, of course, saying, you know what? We all feel a little crazy sometimes. Don't do that. That invalidates someone's experience. And again, they're going to totally shut down to any kind of interaction with you or you being able to support them because they don't feel safe. Things to avoid doing: criticizing, blaming, raising your voice. And that's in that conversation of trying to overtalk them or rationalize with them, being right. We don't want to do that, because again, if they're in a place of where they're struggling with being rational and having clarity, they're not going to hear you. That's like saying wah, 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 wah. Remember the Peanuts? And that's how Charlie Brown's teacher sounded to him. Wah, 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 wah. That's what they're going to hear. So you do not want to do that. Showing any form of hostility or being mad. You know what? If somebody has diabetes and they have an attack, or if someone has heart issues, they have a heart attack. If someone falls and they break a leg, we're not mad at them because that happens. We support them and we try to take care of them and comfort them. So do not have that hostility towards someone that is struggling with depression or anxiety or any other mental health issue. It's because they're not doing it intentionally. It is something that is real and that's going on. So being mad or pissed off is not going to do anything but add gasoline to the fire. Something else to avoid doing is assuming things about their situation. Everybody's journey is different and separate. So the last thing we want to do is make an assumption of what they're feeling or thinking. Even if you have anxiety and you think they might have anxiety, don't make an assumption about how they're feeling or thinking, because you don't know. It's better to ask them than to assume. Because when you begin to make assumptions, you begin to make judgments, you begin to problem solve, and that's the last thing you want to do. Don't be sarcastic or make jokes. Mental health is not a laughing matter. Mental health is very, very important. It's very serious. And remember, because it's very interconnected to our spirit and our body, you have that threesome going on between our mind, body, spirit. And so being sarcastic or making jokes about their mental wellness is not going to be a positive input to the situation. Same goes with being patronizing or being condescending. Don't do that. That's not cool. That's not all right. Think about if the roles were reversed and you were in a situation that you were struggling. Would you want someone to treat you that way and be condescending? I don't think anybody enjoys someone being condescending or patronizing. That pisses me off. Like, I want to come out fighting and punch you in your throat if you're condescending. But the last thing that you want to do is do that with somebody that's struggling with clarity of mental health faculties. So that's the down and dirty on mental health first aid. Does anybody have any questions or any thoughts, anything they'd like to share? I've got some resources that I've listed on the discussion notes. And there's a lot of great resources out there. And again, I am always available that if you need a resource or you have a question, I am not opposed to answering those questions and providing those resources. I believe that information is power. I believe that if you have information, that is your job to educate people that want that information. So if you ever have questions, need information, I am always open to sharing that with you. So that's why I kind of listed some of those resources that you can go to if you're concerned about yourself, if you're concerned about a loved one, if you're like, what do I do next? I can't give you advice. I don't give my clients advice. We have dialogue about what's best for them. And so I can do the same, is maybe pose a couple questions that gets you to thinking, point you in the direction of some resources, and then you have to kind of go from there on your own. But you're not alone, whether it's you experiencing the behaviors and the feelings and the symptoms, or somebody that you care about or someone that you've observed. You're not alone. There's definitely resources out there. But the very first thing we have to do is acknowledge that it is there. So I'm going to assume that since nobody has posted anything, that no questions or thoughts. Next week, for our Lunch and Learn, we have a sex and relationship expert that's going to come on, and she's going to talk about how to keep your relationship spicy. So make sure you tune in next week, 11:30 Central Time, to our Lunch and Learn podcast here on Holistic and Well. I am Wendy, and again, if you haven't grabbed the discussion notes, grab them. I've got the replays on my website through the month of December, and then I've got some big changes coming in December that I'm super excited about, that I hope that some of you will take advantage of. So everyone have a great rest of your day, and I will talk soon. Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Take care. Thank you. Bye.